We never get tired of talking about well-being. I mean, I just love the word well-being. I always think of a water well, and at the bottom is this clear, clean water, and you have to send a bucket down into the well and draw up this living water, which we depend on for our life. I think human beings depend on that living water of well-being as much as food and air. Without well-being, we wouldn't be able to have the wisdom to drive a car and move our hand and not get into accidents. We wouldn't have the ability to enjoy life. We wouldn't have the ability to love other people. A loveless life is so painful. So I had been a psychologist 10 years, and no one had ever told me that I had perfect well-being inside, that I had this living spirit, this living water, this nourishment that was always available to me in any moment, any situation. Isn't that interesting? I'd been trained as a psychologist. I had my doctorate in psychology. No one was talking about well-being. People were only talking about diagnosing illness, as if at the core of people was illness. And to have Sydney Banks, this welder with a 9th grade education, who had directly discovered through his own awakening experience that the very core of life is living water, living spirit. And every one of us is connected to this field of living energy, life energy. It's an infinite field of life energy. And he realized there were 3 qualities to this life energy that were available to every single human being as gifts given to us when we're born. That's pretty cool. No exceptions. No exceptions. Every one of us is connected to this field of life energy. And the fundamental nature of that life energy is an intelligence that knows how to move us through life wisely. No matter what's going on, no matter what's happening, how to move us through life wisely in ways that are best not only for us, but for everybody else around us. That another characteristic that we're all born with is the capacity to move to higher and higher levels of consciousness, where we become more awake, more aware, more in love with life, more where our senses become more alive. What a gift. It's built into all of us, that there are infinite levels of consciousness. That's one of the reasons why we want to get together in Denmark and together explore the depth of our being, this living water, this nourishment, and have greater and greater realization of what's already there. This. And then there's another characteristic: infinite creative potential. And so often we think that the way we're seeing life is the way life is, rather than that's one out of gazillion possibilities of how we can see life. We tend to believe our beliefs, so we become very limited in who we think we are, who we think other people are, what we think is possible. We often get stuck in the way we see life. And the good news is we're connected to this dimension of infinite possibilities. The bonus is anytime any of us for one moment touch this space of infinite potential, awakened consciousness, and wisdom, the experience is we feel closer to anything around us unconditionally. So we can say our very nature is love. I would not have stayed studying these principles for 35 years, exploring this inner depth, if it didn't awaken greater and greater levels of love and compassion for people. Because that's all I wanted in my studies of meditation, psychology, spirituality. My question was always, does it awaken more love? If not, I'm going to move on. And so Natasha and I love talking about this, and we can't wait to share with you and explore with you, because we're all explorers. We're all on the same level, right? There's always more to see, and explore together this dimension of possibilities and awakened life, be able to be lived more wisely, and to fall in love unconditionally with not just our favorite people, but with anybody, and with trees and with flowers and with nature. That's the beauty of this understanding. It literally insights into the principles that we will talk about, awaken deeper, or you could say higher levels of love.
What's not to like?
Yeah, yeah, no kidding.
When we came up with this title, I remember that it came just after I had some insights of my own into well-being. Because one of the things that I've heard, and I bet most of you have heard time and time again, that Sydney Banks used to say was, listen for a feeling. And that always puzzled me a little bit. What feeling is he talking about? Until one day I had this insight about well-being is this feeling. It's not happiness. It's not that it's not happiness, but it's just this beautiful, beautiful feeling from inside. There's nothing that I need to do to get it. There's nothing that I can acquire that will make me feeling more of this well-being. And so I started to see it as being the bridge between the psychological and the spiritual. We always talk about how thought is this bridge, the principle of thought. But with this principle, or with this bridge, there is this feeling, and it's a guide. It's a guide that a lot of us, we don't even notice it. We don't notice that it's right here, just underneath or behind our thinking, our personal thinking. And so I realized that the more we can get in touch with this well of being, our being, the more we get in touch with this feeling, the more we are able to navigate through life. Because there's ups and downs, there's sickness and death and divorces and financial problems and all of those things. Now, did anyone ever tell you that you have a guide inside? I didn't hear that. I didn't know that I have this built-in navigation system. And it's actually very simple. The feeling of well-being is a sense of expansion. There's a feeling of expansion. It's this, and it very much is the same energy as this life, this intelligence of life, this water that Dicken was speaking about. It's like it's loving, it's giving, it's without any judgment. It just gives unconditionally. And then the other feeling comes with tension. When I start thinking about something, what will I do? How can I solve this? We all know that feeling of tension. And so it becomes really simple when I see that there are these two energies or two even feelings. You feel it in your body. What can I do? How will I solve this? You know, you're really thinking about it and it feels tense. It does not feel right. It doesn't feel nice. And the interesting thing is, it's very difficult to get new ideas from this, right? Whereas from this feeling of creativity, possibility, this infinite potential that we're living in all the time. We're living in it constantly, even when we don't feel it. We're living beings that have this potential for a new thought, a new feeling, an idea to how to solve anything. That was why I was so excited about talking to this guy, Rob, yesterday, who in the midst of being worried about his friend, who really is in has a lot of challenges, that as soon as he saw that it was thought that was keeping this tension, he saw it. He let go and he was filled with love. Not love from the outside, but from the love within himself that he is, that his friend is. And it just opened him up to a new idea that he'd never had before. And so this is the potential, this is the hope for anyone, that when we see how this tension is created, how this fear is created in us, that when we see it, it lets go. Sometimes it takes a few minutes or a few hours, me too. But when it does, something new comes. And that is so hopeful. That is, for me, the hope of the three principles understanding. What Sydney Banks gave us was this hope that something can change at any moment.
The truth of life is so simple. Once you start getting a glimpse of what's living us and the nature of what's living us. Isn't it interesting? Like right now, isn't it evident that there's something living us? We're not doing it. There's something breathing you. There's something beating your heart. There's something generating mental activity in your head 24/7. That we're connected to a life force that's living us. Some people call that the quantum field. It's life energy, formless life energy that has the power to create and live anything created. Created my dog. I'm so happy it created my dog. And then it operates my dog so that my dog can respond and be aware and is so loving. I took my dog to the beach. I take him pretty much every day. Took him to the beach yesterday. He couldn't stop smiling. He'd run over to me and sit right down, and I'd take a stick and throw it, and he'd run full speed and come back. And he's being lived by these same forces that live us. He's being guided by this same wisdom. I love that it's called wisdom. I really do. We're connected to a force that knows how to move what's created in optimal ways. It knows how to turn the flower toward the sun and follow the sun, and it knows how to take light and photosynthesize it into energy so that the flower can use that energy practically to grow. I'm glad it's called wisdom. Because if we were connected to a life force that kept moving us toward insanity, you wouldn't call it wisdom. And there have been people in every single culture of the world that when their minds have quieted down from all the thinking that creates that fearful contraction, when people's minds quiet down from their personal thinking, universally they talk about this the same way. This doesn't belong to anybody, any teacher. It doesn't belong to a culture, to a religion, to a philosophy. It doesn't belong to Sid Banks. It doesn't belong to Natasha or myself. Any human being can discover and begin to realize that we're connected to a life force. And so people, when they've fallen out of their thinking, say you're in a cave staring at a little fire. Some people say that's how meditation started. People would sit around, they discovered fire. So at night, they just stare into this fire. Then their personal mind would get quieter and quieter by being fully present. No techniques, no effort, no trying, no working on oneself, no beliefs about something wrong that they're trying to rectify or fix. Staring into this fire and getting quiet, and then discovering they feel more spacious. Discovering that they can tap into a creativity that's boundless. That's where all the new inventions came from, all the new ideas came from. They discovered the crowning glory, discovered every time I drop out of my personal thinking far enough, I fall in love with whoever's around me. So they began to feel a connection, an intimate connection with their tribe, with their clan, with the people around them. They began to feel intimate connections with trees and plants. And even animals, they would feel intimate connections with animals. The birth of awe and wonder. The birth of mystery. given freely to anyone willing to let go of, just for moments, everything you think you know. Sid says this is a secret to discovering our spiritual nature, is a willingness to let go of every single idea, belief, concept, thought. Why? Because we drop into this spacious ground of awe and wonder, and we find out that there are feelings there that lift our spirits and connect us to life in a positive way. Now, I've had the chance to work with kids, parents, doctors, nurses, professors, kids of all ages, policemen, men and women in prison, CEOs of corporation. For 16 years, I worked in big business. And I found out there are no exceptions to the fact that the only thing keeping people from accessing this deeper dimension of love and wisdom is we get involved in the content of our thinking. And then we start thinking that the content is truth. It's the only thing. It's the only thing that creates psychological difficulty for any person. So I can go into a mental institution, which I have many times, and every single person has perfect well-being inside. In other words, if they fall out of their thinking, they're no different than anybody else. They're going to feel more peaceful. They're going to tap into very rich feeling, and they're going to feel more connected to life in a positive way. And when they are connected to this deeper feeling, they have more common sense, so they can live a healthy life from that place. No exceptions. So we have to talk about thoughts so people can understand how innocently and often we get caught up in the content of our thinking, and we begin to feel disconnected from love, disconnected from others. It's inevitable. It happens to me if I get too caught up. Yesterday, I got a little overwhelmed in my first day back at work after 3 weeks of being away. All of a sudden, I said to my wife, "Whoa, I think I have a headache. Oh my God, I haven't done this much thinking in 3 weeks." And I knew then there was nothing wrong, nothing to be fixed. I just needed to drop back into that space that I'm becoming more and more familiar with, where I don't know anything. And when I'm nobody, the great nothingness, out of which always arises aliveness, creativity, love, guidance. No exceptions.
Isn't it cool? Isn't it the best news ever? Don't you and everyone here just want to tell it to everyone that we're all okay, that we have this well of being inside? When I came across this understanding in 2012, it transformed my life, and I ran up to anyone willing to listen to me to try to tell them that didn't work so well, I have to say, but I understand the feeling that I have, that Dicken has. I mean, and Dicken's been doing this for a long time. We never ever get tired of it because it's the best news ever. No one is broken. Wow, that's radical. You know, when we work with people individually, or when we do our groups, to be able to share so deeply And people start seeing, I'm not broken. I'm okay. I have the potential to change my mind. I have the potential to have a new feeling in any moment. So honestly, Dicken and I can't teach you anything. We're still students. What we do is we like to point. We found the space within that we like to point you to, what we call home. And any person that gets a glimpse of their inner home will fall into this feeling of being, this sense of a feeling that's beautiful, that's loving, that's compassionate, that's in love with life. So it is the best news ever to have discovered something that is, there's no exceptions, as Dicken just said. It's true for everyone. And sure, sometimes it takes a little longer to point people, depending on how much thinking they have, what they believe is true. But to see that underneath the surface, like on the top of the surface, there's waves and maybe boats, and there can be lots of things going on the top of the waves, and we can feel separate and alone, but beneath the surface, there's calm, there's oneness. We are connected. So often people feel lonely. The only way you can feel lonely is if you think you're a wave and you don't realize that you're made of water. So there's something that happens to people when they realize, I am connected. We are one. On the surface, we sure look different genders, different races, different religions. There's a ton of different things we could look at. But under the surface, when we look to within, it's the same. We're the same being. And when we see that, when we touch that, when we know that intimately, how am I ever going to want to hurt anyone? Why would I ever steal from anyone? When we see deeply that we are one, it awakens love and compassion. We want to be helpful. We see people who are struggling and we reach out naturally. When ego falls away, there is just love. And so being able to realize our being, that's why we call this seminar Well-Being, Awakening to Your True Self. True self being this being inside that is completely whole, perfect, unbroken, that we share with everyone. And so that's why we want to share this with everyone. And we do, as many people as we can, as we get a chance to touch with this understanding. Both of us work tirelessly to continue to relieve the suffering of humankind, that because so many people innocently haven't been taught. And so they're believing their thinking to be true and suffering the consequences of that. But no matter how long anyone has been doing that, it just takes one little glimpse. It doesn't matter how long the cave has been dark. As soon as light, as fire was invented, as found out, immediately light came. So it's very hopeful that it just needs that little light in anyone's life. So that's just beautiful.
We will also be talking about that it's okay to get lost. I don't know anybody who doesn't. Sid Banks did. It's okay to get caught up in your thinking at times and not realize you're a beautiful, infinite, divine being. One time we asked Sid, how come people get so easily caught up and lose their good feeling and blame the world for it? And he said, well, in truth, we're spiritual beings, which just means we're infinite, formless life energy that has taken form as a physical body. It's still, our physical body is still a dance of energy. It's still just energy condensed. And he says, what happens though when we're born into or manifest as a physical body, we look out at the world and we see things and we start thinking about them. And pretty soon that becomes our world, the visible world, what we can see and our own thinking about it. And we live in that world. And anybody who begins to live exclusively in their own personal thinking will become innocently, I do, everybody I know, there'll be stress, there'll be tension, there'll be feeling less connected to people. There'll be seriousness. You'll get serious. You'll get easily bothered by things. We become identified with our thinking and feeling as who we are. That's what some people would call ego. We become egocentric, ego bound, and we start suffering. Now, nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong with this. It's the easiest thing in the world to just forget that we're connected to an infinite field of life energy because it's invisible. That's why some people call it spiritual or divine, because it's invisible, completely invisible. In quantum physics, they say the visible world, no matter how big or how small, only takes up a small percentage of our universe. And the vast percentage of our universe is dark energy and dark matter, invisible, can't be seen, can't be measured. Sid Banks realized that the vast majority of the formless being that we are is not just a dead void. It's dynamic, loving, creative, alive, full of potential, waiting to burst forth in new life and freshness and aliveness. Our true nature is dynamic. When you say, who are you? And people say, well, I'm Dicken Bettinger and I'm feeling a little down today and I'm this and that and this is what's happening. You're only talking about a small percentage of who you are. And if you start believing that that's who you are, you're going to suffer innocently. Innocently. I love that we have colleagues all over the world now teaching kids in elementary school. You're connected to a wise, loving, guiding energy, and that's your true self. And that only our thinking gets in the way of experiencing that directly. And kids pick up on it so quickly. Oh my gosh, because we're not teaching them anything. We're reminding them of what's true, reminding them of what they already have, reminding them of who they actually in truth are. to watch little kids realize they're caught in thought and letting it go and dropping back into a playful, alive, creative space, which is so easy for them. But without understanding how that works, pretty soon as they get older, they'll get more and more identified with and caught up in their thinking and feeling. And oh boy, the number of teenagers that I worked with during the pandemic who were depressed, super anxious, or suicidal was astounding. I had said I'm not going to do clinical work because I'm so busy with training practitioners, and I couldn't help it. I couldn't say no to parents who said, "Can you talk to my loving daughter is suicidal?" And I just have to remind them, you're not all that negative thinking you're caught up in all day long. And behind that thinking, there's aliveness. Oh, there it is. There it is. Oh my God, here it comes. So easy, so close. Sid would say we're a thought away from disengaging from our personal thinking and experiencing a more spacious presence at all times, everybody, no exception. That you're not broken, that you're not damaged, you're not wrong or bad for feeling the way you do. You're just experiencing your own thinking, and that we can't not do that. But we need to realize how that works, or we're going to suffer. We'll just get caught up. Our friend Bill Pettit, psychiatrist, says someone who's clinically depressed, and I've worked with plenty of people who are clinically depressed, is spending 85% of the time of their day caught up in negative thought, thinking that those thoughts are true. Innocently caught up because they haven't been taught the nature of thought. They haven't been taught they're connected to love and wisdom intimately, always, no exceptions. We can all wake up to what's true, that we're more than the small percentage of what's visible. We're connected to something greater. Everyone intuits the truth of that already, but we can wake up to it more and more so that when we feel tension, we know you can't think your way out of that. And most adults, when they feel tension, stress, or upset, do more thinking. Innocently. But there isn't a human being on this planet that can think their way to the present moment, can think their way to love, can think their way to wisdom. It just, no one can. Sid Banks couldn't. No one can. So we have to teach people about, if you're not thinking, you're not going to be dumb and stupid and get into trouble. You're going to feel better and become wiser. As Natasha says, hey, come on, how cool is that? Isn't that good news? Less work, more love. Less trying, less struggle, more love. You lighten up.
And it's also obvious when people are just, when they are in love, not only with someone, but just in life, you feel it. You look at them once and you feel the love. When I was visiting Dicken and Coisi this summer, we went to the beach with their dog, Oliver. And to see him on the beach, you know, excited for the stick to be thrown, that's love. He's so excited, he's shaking. And we smile as we look at him. You know, if you ever see a teacher that looks really serious, run away. Because this This understanding enlightens the love in us. It reveals the love that we're born with, that we are. And the more people see this, the more smiles you'll get from them, the more lightness you'll experience from them. I remember one time Dick and I was speaking at a conference in New York, and there were 3 girls that we met in the hallway, and they said, "We've just been jumping up and down on our bed. Is that normal?" We went, "Yep." Right? They were so excited about what they were hearing that they couldn't help themselves but jumping up and down. So again, we have a navigation system inside. When you feel lighthearted, when you feel like you want to reach out, you want to connect, you want to help someone, you're connected to this love inside and you become other-centric. When you're down and you're serious and you think this is me and it's problem, and you become egocentric and everything is about me and me and me and why me, and you know, it's so egocentric is caught up in thought. Other-centric is what happens naturally when we feel good, when we when the thoughts have dissolved in the sunlight. So it's obvious, and we want to be with people, don't we, who are lighthearted. Dicken and I, sometimes when we travel together, we go into a restaurant, and sometimes there's some people that are not always happy. We had a maitre d' in London at the breakfast place we were eating, and every day we would try to find ways just to make him smile, because boy, did he look like life was tough. And all the people working there, they looked like life was tough. And so we just wanted, you know, to see if we can make them smile, just compliment them, say that we love the food, or, you know, what a good service we were getting. And as soon as people smile, it's like something breaks through them. You can see it. So it doesn't matter how long the ice mountain has been full of ice, you start putting heat to it, it's gonna melt. And we can be those melting vehicles by sharing the love, by sharing this understanding. And that's really what Dicken and I love doing to individuals and groups. So we really hope that we'll see you later this month, so we can share this with you. And even if you can't make it physically, there's live streaming options. And so you can get in touch with the 3 Principles Danish community and find out about the live streaming options, so you can come be with us. We'd love that.